I'm Andrew Rodriguez, and welcome to Psycho Bible, babbling about psychology and theology. So this video is going to be a follow-up to my last video in which I talked about the differences between thoughts and feelings, why it's important to make the distinction of when you're expressing a feeling versus a thought, and actually the value of our feelings and our emotions and how they actually serve a purpose. That God gave us our emotions for a reason. And so I wanted to follow up with that with a little more on the gender difference when it comes to emotions. Because this is probably the area that really holds us back the most. This idea that men are supposed to be unemotional, that they aren't supposed to feel their emotions, they're not supposed to have emotions, they're not supposed to express emotions. This becomes super problematic. Ooh, I hate using that word. Because of the leftists, they've ruined problematic. But this is probably the greatest culprit for the very issues that I am working with. Men with same-sex attraction, gender insecurity, gender confusion, but also heterosexual sexual addiction and pornography addiction issues. It's this pressure to fit into a rigid stereotype of what it means to be a man, and that their emotions are not valid or that they're not valuable and that they shouldn't feel them. And so when we go into suppression and we think that suppressing and repressing our emotions is what is actually masculine, we end up with a lot of problems. And I'm afraid that with the culture war, it's actually ramping this problem up even more. Because as our culture is becoming more pandering to those that it considers marginalized, toward those who are super sensitive to offense, then there's going to be a reaction on the right to push back to the point of saying, no, men shouldn't have emotions, men shouldn't cry, men should, actually doubling down on all the stereotypes that the left is actually reacting against for decades. A good example of this is a fellow conservative that I generally like, but I have some problems with him, Matt Walsh. So if you follow Matt Walsh on his social media, I only follow him on Facebook, so I don't know if he's also on Twitter or what, and what else he says there. But he's been known for making a lot of disparaging comments about men who emote, men who express their emotions, who show emotions like tenderness or sadness, or who cry. And he's basically becoming a voice for all the old stereotypes that have actually done more harm to men who just don't fit the traditional rigid stereotypes of masculinity. So here's a good case in point. This one post from August 17th, 2023. Historically, if a man wasn't strong, dominant, and unemotional, he and his whole family would die. Only recently has it become a feasible option for men to be feminine and soft and in touch with their feelings. So, he is making a good point. Historically, if a man wasn't strong, dominant, and unemotional, he and his whole family would die. Now, why is that? Because we lived in such dangerous environments, and our lives were constantly at risk. If you weren't constantly working to stay alive, to survive, then yes, you would actually die. Not just you'd be hurt, you'd be sad, you know, like, yes, we needed some degree of stoicism and emotional strength and even some degree of emotional suppression to survive when you're in an actual survival situation. However, that doesn't mean that emotions themselves are feminine. So he's equating expressing your emotions or feeling your feelings with being feminine. So it's only now that we have our civilization built and stabilized and we have these structures in place that now we have the luxury of not suppressing our emotions all the time. And he's looking at that as if it's a negative thing. We should actually be happy. Oh, good. We don't have to keep suppressing our emotions all the time. This is actually a relief. We can breathe. We can share with each other what we feel, and we can attune and attach with others. These are good things. It's good that we're not constantly in survival mode like we were throughout most of history, just trying to forge a way into the frontier and survive and work your butts off for your whole life and not have a moment's rest. Like, this is a good thing now that we're not in that state. And we should appreciate that. We shouldn't treat this as a given either. We shouldn't treat it like, hey, I should be able to just lay around and feel my feelings. No, there's work to do. You gotta do your work. And sometimes that does mean to put on a steel face and be stoic. But this attitude that it's more masculine or just purely male to not feel feelings, and that to feel your feelings is somehow in and of itself feminine, we really need to correct that. When I'm working with guys with same-sex attraction, this is the message that they've received far too often throughout their lives, whether it's from society, but primarily it's going to be in their family, in their home. There are certain rules, maybe unspoken rules, but oftentimes these were spoken, that boys don't cry, that men don't feel, men don't talk. We don't talk about our feelings. We just do, and you just tough it out. If you're allowed to show any emotion, it's anger or aggression. Otherwise, men are supposed to be cool. We're supposed to be even-keeled. We're supposed to be even unenthusiastic. That's something I mentioned in my interview with Kevin Thompson on his YouTube channel, Beyond the Fundamentals, when I'm talking about the double bind that we get into that takes us out of our self-state of assertion. It can even be over a positive feeling. Like, oh, I feel a positive feeling, like maybe joy or enthusiasm, glee, excitement, maybe even affection. And we want to express it, but the other part of us says, nope, if I do, that'll be looked down on. That'll be looked at as gay or effeminate, soft, frilly, feely, touchy-feely, and that's not masculine. So we suppress even our positive feelings. Now, most clients I work with are aware of how they've had to suppress their negative feelings like anger and sadness, grief and fear, anxiety and shame. They've had to suppress that and put on a mask, act like they're better than they are, act like they're more stable than they actually feel. And so the irony is, these are guys I work with who have been called sissy and baby, girly, when actually, because of feelings, because of having feelings or expressing feelings, but by the time they see me as adults, they've so dissociated from their emotions that these are guys who are so out of touch with their emotions. Most of the guys I work with same-sex attraction are actually very much disconnected emotionally. Now, of course, I see this with guys with heterosexual sexual addiction as well. They're also disconnected from their emotions. And it's important to understand that because you're not going to be able to get very far in helping them deal with their sexual addiction issues if you don't understand that sexual addiction is being used by them for emotional regulation. I want to feel a positive feeling, and the only way they've known how to do that was to externalize it through some sort of addictive behavior. I want to escape a feeling of fear or shame. Okay, porn, fantasy, acting out with someone. So whether we're dealing with heterosexual or homosexual, oftentimes the eroticization is being used for regulating non-sexual emotions. And this is a result from when we have this pervasive and culturally or familiarly reinforced message that men don't cry, that men don't feel feelings, that only girls feel feelings. So a lot of my work with clients is to help them get in touch with their emotions. And actually, that is what helps them get to a place of true masculinity. So, to Matt Walsh, I say this, and this is what I actually posted in his comments. In war and times of desperation, yes, steel-faced stoicism is definitely needed. But a well-integrated man knows when to access and express his emotions. Otherwise, he externalizes them in rage and addiction, or represses them, or suppresses them, and then that leads to repression, becoming emotionally detached from his wife and kids, creating the very family dynamic that leads to a generation of anxious and insecure young men. Meaning, when your father is so emotionally detached that you're not experiencing warmth and love and affection from him, then you grew up insecure and anxious yourself. You need a strong father who's also benevolent, who's emotionally attuned and attached to you. So, like, Matt, seriously, use a bit more wisdom in your hot takes. And I only say this because he says this so often, I know he's actually being serious. Because Matt has a career as a shock jock and saying controversial things, and he's playing a role a lot of times. I think people get bent out of shape by a lot of his posts, and he goes real far to really get conversation going. So it's hard to tell sometimes. All right, is he being facetious? Is this really what he believes? Is this really what he thinks? So you gotta see, is this something he consistently says all the time? And in case there's any doubt, in his recent video he's talking about the show Bluey. I don't watch it, it's a kid's show. But apparently there's a bit of a stir over this recent episode where Bluey's dad got a job and they'd have to move, and Bluey and his mom didn't want to move because they missed their friends and family wherever they live. And at the last minute the dad gets a call, doesn't have to move, whatever. So Matt Walsh makes a video and he's being his typical curmudgeon self. But he takes a moment to pause and be like, people think I'm joking about this or I'm not serious about it. But he really doubles down and he makes it quite clear. He is serious that men should not show emotions.
Now look, you may think that I have gone too far at times in my demand for stoicism from men. Even if you think that, you must admit there should be limits. Now, I personally believe that as a man, your wife and your children should almost never see you cry. Only in the most extreme circumstances, in response to the most devastating tragedies, should they witness such a display. A man should have, and I don't say that ironically or to be funny, that's what I really believe. A man should have control over his emotions and should not show weakness, especially in front of people who depend on him to be the strong and confident one. And if you cry as a man, especially in front of your kids and your wife, you make them feel vulnerable. You make them feel like you don't have control over the situation. And again, only in the extreme circumstances should you put your family members in a spot like that. You do it too often or you do it for frivolous reasons, and they will start to feel unsafe and insecure, and they'll lose respect for you. Your wife will lose respect for you. It's like for a woman, and some will say this out loud, most won't, but this is what they all think. For a woman to witness a man crying for a dumb reason is the most repulsive thing that they could possibly witness. It's disgusting to them. It really is. At like a deep primal level, it's revolting. So it's just something you should realize. Now, perhaps you think that I'm too stringent in this regard. Fine.
As he's making fun of a dad who's watching Bluey and he's crying. Now, if a man is crying over watching this scene that they showed in Bluey, which I think was just pretty basic stuff, it's not that profound. Like Matt is saying, I agree with him. The episode is not that profound. Not so profound that an adult man would be that stirred by it, normally. So I'm almost thinking, like, are we this out of touch? Are we this emotionally disconnected that this is enough to put us over the edge? Or are we that overly sensitized that this puts over the edge? I can understand some concern here. But to just make a blanket statement that men shouldn't feel their feelings at all, this is damaging. We need to actually fight against this stereotype, because this is what's going to hurt society more in the end. I've talked about this in my recent video about Ken Williams and the person in the comments section who's saying he still sounds gay. He's got like an effeminate voice, which really I don't think he does. But I use that as a platform to talk about how when we have these rigid stereotypes of masculinity, that it actually hurts those who don't quite fit those stereotypes. And those are the underlying issues of shame and rejection from others that then get internalized and produce the gender insecurity and the same-sex attraction, the eroticization of the men who seem more masculine. So if we want to actually solve that issue, we're worried about men being more effeminate, we're worried about same-sex attraction, or we're worried about homosexuality and trans issues, then we need to reconsider the stereotypes in our culture, our churches, and our family, and how rigidly we enforce them, so that we can actually provide a space for men who don't fit the warrior archetype, or the man who's like the jock type, or the soldier archetype who never shows emotions, who just steel-faced and cold and hard, and just has a strong work ethic. That's important, that's necessary. But there are other archetypes of masculinity throughout history that we need to acknowledge and affirm once again. This would actually be what is healing to society and to individuals who are struggling with their gender, with their sense of masculinity, with their attractions. Archetypes like the poet-artist archetype, who appreciates the beauty in creation and the beauty of relationships. The romantic archetype as well. There's men who are in touch with their masculinity actually are romantic, and they're not just like, hey, I told you I loved you once, if I change my mind I'll tell you. No, I tell my wife I love her every day, multiple times a day, that I'm attracted to her, that I find her the most beautiful woman in the world. I express my affection to her regularly. Like, that's what a masculine man does. He appreciates the beauty in the opposite sex, and he pines after it. There's nothing effeminate about that. That's what's wild. You're not going to show affection if you think that emotions are bad and emotions are effeminate, and so you should just suppress them. I'm not going to help meet my wife's needs, and God willing, when I have children, I'm not going to meet their emotional needs if I have this attitude. So we need to get back to other aspects of masculinity so that we can be comprehensive and well integrated as men. Like I was saying, yes, stoicism does have its place. But the stoicism works insofar as you don't actually care about the source of an attack against you or the issue itself. Now, say, for example, if someone is criticizing you, if someone is attacking you, having stoicism is going to be very useful, so that you're not crumbling every time someone makes fun of you or says mean words to you or tries to oppose you. You can be resilient and have emotional strength that is necessary. It's going to help us really get over a lot of the hurdles that we're seeing in society these days. So, say for example myself, I'm pretty short, alright? I'm not even 5.5 feet. I'm like 5'5.5". I'm like, dang, can't I just be like half an inch taller so I can be 5'6", right? So, if you want to make short jokes about me, fine, go ahead. Like, I have a bunch I say myself. I had a friend in college who was taller, and he was Viking origin, so I called him my Viking, and he called me his leprechaun, and we joked around like that. He would lift me up over his shoulders and toss me around. Like, I like saying I'm fun-sized, okay? So you can make fun of my height. I'm not going to be affected because I've learned to not care about that issue. I've come to a place of acceptance of that reality. However, stoicism has a limit when we really do care about the source of the criticism or the source of the attack, or if it's a soft subject that we're still working on accepting. Okay? So even though I don't care about my height, I've come to accept it. There's times where I wish I was a little bit taller, but in general, it doesn't bother me if I get criticized for it. But if my wife, whom I do care about, whom I do love, if she were to say to me, you need to be taller or I don't want to be seen around you, that would hurt. It's not just, oh, well, hey, sticks or stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. When it's coming from the person I care about the most, her opinion matters the most to me. And so if she were to say, I can't be with you anymore, you're too short, that would crush me, because it involves then a loss of an attachment and a connection I have with her. So I'm thinking about a recent post I just saw from Gibbs. I talked about him in some other videos. He's a resilience educator whom I reference a lot in my counseling. I oftentimes will play one of the videos he's done where he tells a girl at a high school that he's speaking at to call him an idiot. And he teaches students how to be emotionally strong, how to be anti-fragile. And so he'll actually teach them the golden rule. He might not say it's the golden rule, but that's what he's doing. Is like, treat others like you'd want to be treated. And so if someone's being mean to you, don't get mad and treat them like a friend. And so he shows how you can disarm the person by being kind. And so I refer to him a lot, and at the same time, I have enough wisdom to know that there are times where you do need to be affirmed properly, that there's more than just simply saying, no, I don't care what people say about me, in order to get through a difficult situation. There's a bit of a misconception, partly due to psychology, but more pop psychology, that kids are just naturally resilient. Okay, so they can go through all sorts of difficulties and they'll just bounce back. It's okay. But the truth is, there are actually preconditions to emotional resiliency, and it's attachment. It's having a secure foundation through someone emotionally bonding with you, that you then have a sense that I'm valuable and I have legitimate needs, and I can trust a person, a particular person who's connected with me, to help me meet those needs. And so I'm good, and someone else, there are certain people out there that are good. I can trust at least certain people, may not the entire world, but that comes from having a secure attachment which is developed in infancy and the early years of life through emotional attunement and attentiveness. You don't get to a place of emotional resiliency without that. If you don't have that consistency, if you don't have that support system in place, then when you experience an event that could be traumatic, you actually will be traumatized. Whereas there are plenty of cases where kids do go through things that may be traumatic, or at least we might consider it a trauma, but they bounce back. They endure it. They actually get stronger because of it. But that's because they had the pre-existing condition of secure attachment. So because I know about this, I've been able to take with a grain of salt certain things that Gibbs has said over the years. Because if you read the comment sections of some of his posts, a lot of people come against him, saying that, oh, his advice isn't realistic. He's teaching students to be emotionally strong, but people are like, that's not real, that wouldn't work in real life, and you're just being insensitive to people who have trauma, etc., etc. And so he shared a photo of his son on his prom date, and he had this to say about his son, and I found this very encouraging. This is my oldest son, Braden, with his prom date. I couldn't be more proud of the outstanding young man he has become. He is head and shoulders above them all, wise beyond his years. Since he was a toddler, I have learned to listen to his advice and take it to heart. He has always had such a sensitive instinct to know what is true and right. He has grown up watching me study and teach millions of students how to become emotionally resilient. What nobody knows is that he has corrected me in my teachings many times along the way. He has taught me most about the Achilles heel of emotional resilience, which is relational attachment. I'll never forget him telling me, Dad, what you teach is great for strangers and peers, but not for best friendships and loved ones. Oh man, that stung. But after meditating on that for a long time, I discovered he was right. When we are relationally attached to loved ones, we have built-in needs and expectations that make us vulnerable to heartbreak. Without these reasonable expectations, there can be no intimacy. When people are attached, they are basically living by a simple principle that is something like this. What is important to you is important to me, and what is important to me is important to you. If we are going to stay attached, we need to accommodate each other's deepest needs. I am still trying to grasp the depths of his insights. So Brooks, I'm so glad you got that insight, because yes, attachment is necessary to get to that place of anti-fragility, of emotional strength and resilience. One person I really admire who is helping do this work is Jason Wilson. He's in Detroit. He runs a dojo that he calls the Cave of Adullam, after the cave where David and his mighty men would go to retreat. And it's an outreach for boys who are at risk. And he trains them up comprehensively, not just in martial arts, but also in biblical principles and masculinity. And he's written a couple books. One of them is his autobiography, Cry Like a Man, and Battle Cry, where he's teaching a lot of the life principles he's come to discover about becoming a comprehensive man. And I was listening to him read his book. I was listening to the audio version of this on my flight to Poland last year. And literally, I was in tears at times on this flight, listening to him share the stories of working with these young men who are at risk or have come out of broken homes, who are at risk of addictions or misbehavior in school. And it's through affirming their value, affirming their worth, helping them identify their emotions, him attuning with them. You can see videos of him doing this work with them. When a boy is angry and he's lashing out, he's not just rebuking him, telling him to stuff your anger, be a man, don't let your anger out. Just no, he's attuning with him. And when we are actually attuned to our emotions, then we can possess them. So we need to be aware of them in order to actually lay hold of them and then know what to do with them. And so we listen to our emotions to identify what is the underlying need or desire, the goal, the value that this emotion is communicating something about. So then we can process them, address them, verbalize and express them maturely. When we don't do this, it has drastic implications. I see this in the counseling world all the time. But yes, there are gender differences when it comes to emotions. 12 years I worked in the office staff of the largest mental health and drug and alcohol provider in Pennsylvania. The largest on the East Coast, actually, multi-site counseling practice. Pyramid Healthcare bought us in 2014, but before that we're Onward Behavioral Health, and we had rehab after work / rehab after school and life counseling services and the LIGHT program. So we had multiple services. And so for years I worked in the intake department, receiving phone calls from referral sources like hospitals, but also clients just calling in to schedule for themselves or someone else. Overwhelmingly, you see a difference in gender. Men go for addiction, behavioral or substance abuse, and women are coming in for depression and anxiety. Obviously there's overlap, but there is a preponderance of men who, I would say, because of how we are, maybe partly our makeup, but also I think a large part of it, how we're socialized and how we are conditioned to suppress our emotions. It leads to men externalizing their emotions and acting out their emotions through addictions like drug and alcohol or gambling and sex addiction. So yes, there are gender differences when it comes to our emotions. Part of that is neurological. Some brain studies show that women's brains have more of the neurons that are more inwardly focused, increasing their capacity for what we call interoception. Interoception being the awareness of your emotional state. And so men tend to be a little more outwardly focused in their neurons, and what signals they're picking up on are more from external stimuli rather than their internal stimuli and their sense of what their body is communicating to them. So yes, we are a bit at a disadvantage compared to women, but it is important that we develop this emotional awareness if we're going to become integrated, comprehensive men. So before we wrap up this video, just real quickly, what are some basic things that you can do? If you want to grow into maturity, you have to develop emotional intelligence. There's no way around that. Sorry, this is going to be an integral part of your own healing journey. So, first, if you don't even know names of emotions, literally I have clients who don't know words for emotions. I know I have some criticism about them, but get yourself at least a feeling wheel. And so you can at least be aware of certain words for different emotions. Okay, I got some critique about the feeling wheels. I think some of the words they have on there aren't quite emotions, but they're thoughts or judgments, perspectives. But start from the basic ones. And as you attune yourself more, you can be more aware of the intensity and the nuances of your feelings. Okay? So to help you grow in that awareness, we wanted to do some basic things like mindfulness. Mindfulness meaning you're going to practice paying attention to your body, to your internal experience, to your thoughts, your feelings. So you can help, one, discern thoughts from feelings, but also see with a thought, is there a feeling that's being communicated in that thought as well? And as I notice a certain feeling or an emotion being communicated, let me investigate further. Also, as we're doing mindfulness, just like, say, doing some sort of practice that helps you gain mastery of what you pay attention to, whether it's doing something mundane and doing it in a mindful manner, such as paying attention to only one thing at a time, what we call being one mindfully do something. So don't try to split your attention. So if you're going to do the dishes, just do the dishes. Don't listen to a podcast while you're doing the dishes. Don't talk to someone while you're doing the dishes. Just do the dishes, and then maybe to help yourself pay attention to it more, self-narrate. You know, I'm scrubbing this plate, I'm rinsing this plate, I'm putting this here. So that's doing something mundane that is in such a way that will increase your attention to what you're doing. That will in turn eventually help you be more aware of other things, what you're feeling. You can just simply do mindful breathing, which is a difficult task for certain people, but I've talked about this in other videos, so I'll reference that. Doing some sort of mindful practice will be useful in you gaining more awareness. But it also helps you gain more mastery over your reaction to what you become aware of, to the thoughts and the feelings that emerge. And then in therapy and even on your own, we do body work or intensive body work. This is something I learned from Nicolosi, senior and junior, and that is to pay attention to what you're feeling when you're thinking about something. Maybe there's a conflict, maybe there's a fantasy, or maybe some sort of erotic experience that you want to change how you feel or how you respond to it. Notice it and then pay attention to your body. What do you feel? And just do that. Don't try to change what you feel. Don't try to change the experience. Just notice it. Oftentimes, as I'm training my clients in this work, sometimes you're just noticing it. It goes away on its own without them having to suppress it. But really try to pay attention to it. Other times, then they're able to learn ways of actually gaining mastery over it. Then they breathe into it. Maybe they receive another experience, like as they're attuned to me as well, and they receive my acceptance, my understanding. That's able to be integrated, and the feelings is able to change. So pay attention to your body. During mundane experiences, maybe just you have an interaction, check in. Before it gets to the point where you have a strong emotion and then you just sort of spike and you act down some way, or you have a strong reaction, check in. What am I feeling right now in this experience? Or after the experience is over, I have a conversation with a friend, or someone at work made a snide comment toward me. Just check in. What am I feeling right now? Check in my body. So these are some basic things that you can do to grow in this, and I try to train my clients in. And this is probably the most important thing I train my clients in, is actually emotional awareness. It will serve you well in your relationships, in your healing and recovery. Alright, if this gave you something to think about, If you're feeling something about it, drop a comment in the comment section. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, please know that Jesus loves you freely, fully, faithfully, and fruitfully.